Hey Kyle, thanks a lot for your response. I appreciate you taking an interest in this discussion, and I certainly wouldn't want to strawman materialism. And I know that there are a variety of approaches that could be called materialistic. Um, I would even classify myself as a materialist, though from a pan-experientialist perspective. And that just means that I don't think matter is a projection of the mind, but at the same time, I don't think consciousness is somehow a creation of matter having evolved to a certain level of complexity. I think the interior dimension of conscious experience and the exterior surface of material bodies have been connected from the beginning of time. I find good reason to believe something like that. Um, Now, the thing I don't quite agree with, though, is that, you seem to imply, well, you say that in due time, maybe quite soon, there will be physicalist explanations to account for conscious experience. Um, you also talk about how the discovery of mirror neurons accounts in a materialist way for how we could have feelings of empathy for others and so forth. And certainly, it's a great discovery that we have a sector of our brains devoted entirely to um, empathizing with others, taking their perspective almost, without even trying to. It's just looking at someone in pain or what have you, and then empathizing with them directly as if we were them. Um, but the thing is, that if without a physicalist explanation for consciousness, in other words, without a legitimate and convincing story for how neurons create consciousness, that won't work. We can't say that mirror neurons explain empathy. Um, there's certainly a correlation here between an empathetic experience and mirror neurons, but the causal connection has not yet been explained, and I'm skeptical that it can be. Um, why neurons arrayed in the admittedly complex ways that they are would somehow create this interior depth of awareness is beyond my ability to comprehend, which is why I adopt the pan-experientialist position. Um, and as far as materialism not being synonymous with the scientific method, it's certainly traditionally science has been about measuring the material world, and that was Galileo's basic maxim was, you know, to make everything measurable that could possibly be measured, and that anything else just wouldn't be considered real. Um, but the thing is, though, this is what I view as the scientific method. Basically, you have some type of injunction or prescription for how to perform a certain experiment. Um, After having performed it, you observe the result, and then you share that information with others. They perform the same experiment, go through the same injunction, have the same observation, hopefully, and then you discuss it. Maybe they have a different observation, and then you argue about what the implication is, and you perform more experiments, and so on. This doesn't necessarily have to apply to just material measurements. We can apply this method to conscious experience. Um, Say if we ask a Tibetan Buddhist about certain techniques of meditation, he will give us an injunction. Perform um, this particular kind of meditation, observe what the result is, and then we'll discuss it afterwards. Why shouldn't that be considered just as scientific as empirically measuring something out there in the world very distant from us? I think we can still do science on our interior experience. We can't measure it with a yardstick, or look at it through a telescope or a microscope. But in a sense, there's nothing more intimately or close to our conscious experience than our own experience itself. And it's certainly more difficult to do science, to have a science of consciousness, which is why it's sort of been neglected for the last 400 years. But I think that we have an obligation to explore this in a scientific way, and I think we can. And there's no reason to suspect that all of the knowledge that has been gained through the kind of assumptions that Galileo and Descartes and Newton made will somehow be washed away. I would never suggest that. But certainly it can be recontextualized. It can be put in the context of what it means to be a conscious observer, because we really haven't. Science hasn't explored that at all. And it's still looking for a physicalist or mechanical explanation for how consciousness is produced. It hasn't found one yet, and I don't think it will, because it almost seems like a category error to me. As far as evidence based on experience goes, I mean, what is science? Certainly science is based on measurement of experience, sensory experience, but it seems as though certain paranormal experiences, like telepathy, require that we not adopt this objective point of view where we distance ourselves from the phenomenon, because we can't. It is, by definition, a subjective experience. And many people have reported having this experience. I myself have had this experience, which again, reading people's minds is not exactly what I would like to classify or describe this experience as having been. It wasn't a verbal experience. I wasn't reading the thoughts, the words going through their minds. It was more of a visual experience, visualizing, certain geometrical arrangements, or it's difficult to even describe linguistically. But having such an experience leaves me with the impression that there is something significant to be explored concerning this, something that I cannot explain in terms of two separate bodies exchanging information through some type of physical medium, be it words or gesture or whatever. It was something other than that, communication through some other means than that. And I'll think more about this and try to come up with ways to explain it better. I guess I'll leave it at that. Thanks for your responses. I really appreciate your engagement with these topics, and look forward to going a little bit deeper. We'll see where it leads us. But thanks for listening.